Hey, Charger fans, welcome into another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host. Joining me, as always, are my esteemed co-hosts, Tyler and Alex. Alex, we'll start today with you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Just finished that mock draft. So yeah, taking JC Horn at 13 as it currently stands, and some people were happy about that, and some people weren't.
It's definitely become a very interesting conversation, because of Jason Horn's pro day, which, I mean, like, it's funny because if you really watch Jason Horn's film, like, you knew he was a high level athlete, right? And like, you knew that Patrick Surtain was also a high level athlete, and so, it's just funny how like pro day narratives shift things. Like I did the poll today of like who would you take between Christian Darrisaw and JC Horn essentially, and Patrick Surtain, and it's wildly in favor of Horn. So it's a little interesting there. But that's another conversation for another day. Tyler, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for calling me esteemed. I appreciate that. And for those of you that were left tackle or bust, most of you are just busting right now. So I'm not really sure what happened to that whole thing. It lasted a good 30 days, but I guess we don't care about Justin Herbert.
Oh man, like I don't know. I can, like I said like a few episodes, like I can certainly see the Chargers moving off of the offensive tackle route just because of how deep this class is. And maybe they'll do what they did last year and trade back into the first round and grab a guy. So we don't really know. But still, for me, like I'm not the biggest Christian Darrisaw fan in the world, but I would be thrilled with that pick because it means that they're investing in the offensive line at a pick that they should in the first round. So again, that's another conversation. We did have a little bit of news over the weekend. We talked a little bit about the Kyler Fackrell news that broke while we were recording, but we wanted to discuss that a little bit. Tyler, you did another mini breakdown like you did on Oday Abuji. What was kind of your main takeaway after watching Kyler Fackrell and doing that breakdown?
He's a big guy. I think he's 6'5", 250 something. I think he's really good against the run. This reminds me, I'm not saying because he's white, but he is white. It reminds me of Jarrett Johnson back when the Chargers signed him in 2014 or 13, whatever it was. So that kind of presence who you're not counting on to be an incredible edge rusher, nor a true starter, but someone who can come in, be that veteran presence and take care of business. And I think that's great. And if I've not watched any of him on special teams, but if he's as good at finding the football on defense as he is on reverse that. If he's as good at finding the football on special teams as he is on defense, he'll be a good special teams player for sure.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a great special teams contributor, and like they really need special teams contributors ever since Adrian Phillips and Derek Watt and all those guys kind of left. They've really just been looking for those guys, and so he'll mainly be a contributor there. And he does have good pass rushing ability. Like you don't luck your way into 10.5 sacks that he had in Green Bay in 2018. Not saying he's going to do that on the Chargers. I think he's much more like a 3, 4, 5 sack season kind of guy. Yeah. Granted, the sad thing about this pass rush is if you put Kyler Fackrell on the Chargers last year, he would have been third on the team in sacks with 4. So that's just, the state of the anemic pass rush. But I think he'll be a solid contributor. And yeah, that's really all it is to it. He'll rotate in whenever Nwosu or Bosa, one of those guys needs a break. And I think he's a great, kind of clutch signing.
Yeah, it's definitely a value signing, and his, I'm pretty sure that's the veteran minimum for the amount that they got him. So him and Oday Abuji will not count against the compensatory pick formula, which is huge due to their salaries. And so it's a good signing. Like, I think I'd rather have Fackrell than, Isaac Rochelle, as much as we all liked Rochelle, the person rather. I'm totally okay with Kyler Fackrell as the third or fourth pass rusher. I still think the Chargers should and will draft an edge rusher with one of their top 100 picks. It's just, you cannot have enough pass rushers, and especially when you do switch to, a 3-4 defensive scheme. I know they've said repeatedly, like, it's not going to always be the 3-4 front, but like they need more athletes and they need more bodies, frankly. So I do expect them to add a pass rusher there. The other news, which it was really interesting to see this happen on Twitter the other day, was the signing of Chase Daniel. There were a lot of people that, the sky is falling because Easton Stick was a wasted pick, and Chase Daniel's a bum, and like, what does this even do? And I don't really understand that logic at all, man. I mean, I thought that he was a fine backup target for the Chargers. At this point in his career, you're not bringing him in for what he does on the field. You're bringing him in for what he does off the field, and his knowledge and familiarity with what the Chargers are probably going to be running with Joe Lombardi. And he was in Chicago with Brandon Staley as well, so he's got that relationship. And really, that's the main thing, is you want to be able to have somebody who can kind of mentor both Justin Herbert and Easton Stick at this point in their careers, because Stick has played in 60 snaps of NFL football if you count preseason. So his ability to mentor these guys is going to be it's a big part of what this team does. And if Easton Stick beats him out in training camp to be the primary backup, then so be it. Chase Daniel, his role will still be that off the field mentor. And honestly, like, the Chargers have 2 more years to figure out what Easton Stick is. And signing Chase Daniel does not impede them from developing him into the backup of the future, which is what they drafted him to be 2 years ago.
Hey, don't forget, he had 2 pain management snaps against the Jaguars. That was the actual quote from Anthony Lynn. But yeah, yes. I think this is the right move on kind of a number of facets. It's just like, one, you get a guy that knows the Lombardi system and knows, the quarterback coaching room and how that works with him. He was in New Orleans for 8 years. I think as Breeze's backup from 2010 to 2017. So I think it takes pressure off of Easton Stick, for one, because you're not having to throw Easton Stick there as your last ditch option in case Justin Herbert has to come out for a snap. So I think that's a good thing for Easton Stick in his development. He has 2 years left on his deal. And for all you Easton Stick people out there, like, it's this simple: beat him in training camp. I don't know, like, just do it. I don't know. Show if Easton Stick has developed so much from that 2019 preseason, he can show it to us in the 3 preseason games he'll have this year. So there's that. But I just was never comfortable with Easton Stick being the primary backup, as much as, there was like a cap emphasis behind it, because, like, okay, don't pay a backup quarterback and you can pay other positions. Chase Daniel costs $1.5 million. He's not preventing you from signing any other players. I think he's a good veteran backup, knows Lombardi system, and that's a good thing for Herbert to have as a mentor. I don't know if he really needs someone to teach him how to play quarterback, but it's easy to just have a guy there where you can bounce things off of him. I think that's a good, kind of weapon to have for Justin Herbert. And as far as Easton Stick, people have been talking about using him as a Taysom Hill, which I just absolutely detest. But I think he still has another year after this year if they do go with Chase Daniel over him. But he could still win this year in the quarterback battle if he does show himself, and he can keep improving. I really just don't think there's any negative to this, whether you're an Easton Stick truther or not.
Yeah, I think the Chargers under Telesco have sort of traditionally kept a developmental guy as a third quarterback on the roster behind a more established veteran. So you had Rivers, Whitehurst, and then Sorensen. I think they drafted in 2013. Then you had, Rivers, Geno Smith, Cardell Jones, who they traded for, Rivers, Taylor, Stick, right? So now you have, when that was Herbert, Daniel, and Stick. So I think that's always just something that Telesco has done. And I'm fine with that. I think fans, I think they were complaining about this being a wasted pick, but you don't just develop quarterbacks in the 5th round with no second preseason in 2 years. That just doesn't happen. Not every guy is going to be, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, or whatever. The other thing is, while Brandon Staley his influence is going to be obvious and felt very much so on this offense, he's not always going to be in that quarterback meeting room. It's not just his job to sit there and teach Justin Herbert. He has a defense to coach too. And so having someone who he can, whether it be relaying messages to or help teach Herbert this or whatever, that's also a veteran to also guide him in that quarterback locker room or the meeting room is fantastic. So I think this is a great signing. Easton Stick averages 1 NFL snap per season so far, and that's just not enough compared to, I mean, honestly, at this point, almost any veteran quarterback would have been better, because at least they can tell you what I did in this quarter or during this game, where Stick can't tell you that.
Yeah, like I said, he can still return value as a long-term backup. And, everybody kind of freaking out about this as being a wasted pick. I mean, he was always drafted to be a backup quarterback. So, this doesn't really change that. And he's still going to be a backup quarterback. It's just a matter of if he is the backup. So just a quick note, he was only in New Orleans for 4 seasons. He was there from 2009 to 2012. And then back in New Orleans in 2017. So he had stints with the Chiefs and the Eagles in between then. And then after 2017, he went to the Bears for 2 years, and then last season with the Lions. So he's spent 5 seasons with this current coaching staff, but still plenty of experience to rely on there for Chase Daniel. So, guys, any other thoughts on Chase Daniel and Kyler Fackrell before we move on to our next topic?
No, I don't really have too many more thoughts. The only thing I just wanted to say was, like we were saying, it's just Easton Stick can still develop, show who he is, and it's not a wasted pick, because I was looking at the guys that went past that Easton Stick or went behind Easton Stick today, and it's like, am I killing myself that we didn't get Darius Slayton and Myles Gaskin? No. So I don't really think it was too wasted of a pick. And, the Phillip Rivers retirement and the Justin Herbert factor weren't things that you could account for in 2019, or Phillip Rivers going to the Colts and then having the quarterback come in the first round. That's not something you could have accounted for then.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was drafted as a long-term developmental backup quarterback, and he can still be that. So we do have a treat for you guys today. Alex and I were able to interview Donald Parham over the weekend. We had a great chat with him about the coaching staff and Justin Herbert and his experience coming back from the NFL and how that has worked. So we will get to that right now and give it a listen. All right, Chargers fans, welcome back. We are so happy to be joined now by Chargers tight end Donald Parham. Donald, thanks for taking the time to join us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
We're doing great, man. We're so excited to have you, and we're really excited about your future and the team's future. Obviously, there's been a lot of change in Los Angeles, brand new coaching staff. Have you been able to connect with your new coaches, and what has been your first impression of the new staff?
I've gotten to connect with our tight end coach, and he's really down to earth and straightforward with what he envisions for me this coming up season. So I mean, I'm really enjoying that.
What was your kind of experience in the XFL like, right? Because you joined that league, you become this superstar tight end, 360 yards, you're going off, and then the league shuts down. What was your whole thought process through that, all the emotions, and then, eventually getting to the Chargers? What was all that like?
It was definitely a fun experience. It was different in terms of like professional football, definitely because of the rules and facilities and
I think you just cut out there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely a different experience. The speed of the game is definitely different, and then also just how you play the game to win is definitely it was really fun though, to be honest. And it was kind of crazy how it shut down all of a sudden because of COVID, and it had a lot of people kind of miss an opportunity because the season didn't finish out. A lot of people didn't get as much exposure as they wanted to, but I mean, it was overall a good experience for me personally.
How quickly was that process, and what was like the transition like? Because I mean, the XFL shut down, and then I feel like relatively quickly you signed with the Chargers. Did you have other teams interested in you, and what was that experience like?
I personally didn't, talk to the different teams. It was my agent more so, but I heard there was a few other teams interested. It was definitely, honestly, it was more exciting than like in your face, because it was like, okay, it was like once COVID hit, it was like, dang, what do I do now? But as soon as it was over, it was like I was signing with them. So it was definitely a blessing in that aspect.
And how did it feel, to finally kind of make an NFL roster, right? You were sort of on the practice squad in the offseason with Detroit and Washington, but, with the Chargers, you finally make that roster. What was that feeling like?
It was definitely a welcoming experience in terms of how they made me feel in terms of coming into the building and, wanting me to make an impact for their team. And so it was definitely just like a blessing overall in terms of them giving me an opportunity to do what I can do.
I'd like to go back to your training camp experience for a little bit, because I imagine that, Alex said you've been in a couple of training camps before. But was the training camp experience with the Chargers different? Like, did you have a moment in camp where you're like, all right, I know I belong here. I know that I can succeed here. And I think that I can make a name for myself on this Chargers team.
I feel as though the Chargers training camp was just an overall better experience because I feel like the coaching staff as a whole, well, mainly the offensive coaching staff, they believed in me more and my abilities. And so that was just where that kind of set itself apart from those other teams. So, I mean, I was given a better opportunity, I feel like, and it was overall just a blessing.
Obviously, there's a lot of change in the tight end room for the Chargers this year. Hunter Henry's gone to the Patriots. Jared Cook's coming in. How do you feel about the potential of playing a bigger role on this team going forward?
I just take it for what it is, and making sure that I'm putting my best foot forward, making sure that I'm I'm getting prepared for that opportunity that I've been given. And, having that experience come into the room from Jared Cook. It's just like it's going to be really something special this year.
Yeah, what kind of things do you think you'll be able to learn from him? Because honestly, I mean, we've only seen you, on glimpses of the field, but your guys' game is pretty similar. You're both taller, more athletic guys, nimble with the feet, shall we say. What do you think you'll be able to learn from Jared Cook this season and going forward?
Just how to, exploit the game in terms of collecting as much knowledge as I can, perfecting my craft and all that kind of thing, because like you said, like we're both kind of similar in terms of how we play the game. So, I mean, I'm just going to be a sponge this year and just absorbing all I can from the guy.
Yeah, and I got to ask, what was your favorite play of last season? Because you obviously had the big touchdown against the Buccaneers. You have that nice touchdown against the Chiefs. What was the moment where you felt like you had kind of arrived in the NFL with a big moment?
Yeah, it would definitely be that touchdown in Tampa, being home, like right up the road. Family couldn't come to the game, but it was okay because, they were like 45 minutes away, and, they're always showing me love from wherever they're at. And it was just special to come home and get a touchdown for my first catch.
Yeah, man, that is pretty special because your first catch was a touchdown, and then Tyron's first catch was a touchdown as well in that game. So that must have been pretty special for you guys.
It was.
So I got to ask you, there's a social media trend. I don't know if you're aware of it, but a lot of Chargers fans call you Chicken Parm.
Yeah.
Did that nickname stem from your college days, or was that kind of just something that was adopted recently?
No, that was adopted in training camp. I can't quite remember exactly when, but it was like right before we moved out of the hotel for the regular season. So it was just kind of like, I mean, okay, I guess I got another nickname. So yeah, but it kind of stuck throughout the team, and it just kind of spread like wildfire.
That's awesome, man. What did you have a nickname in college? What was the nickname in college?
I had a nickname. It was called Tree. I was Tree back in school. So
I can see why. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about the XFL and your experience there. There's another Charger, Storm Norton, who was a great offensive lineman in the XFL. Is there anything specifically from the XFL that you think prepared you in terms of going into the NFL?
Just showing basically that I can compete with the higher level competition, because that was always like the thing. And I guess everybody in the back of everybody's mind when I was coming out of college. Because I was at a D1 AA, a smaller school. So it was just kind of like that, I guess opened a lot of eyes to my abilities, and, I made sure that I did whatever I could, to dominate the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just such an important opportunity, right? And I hope that they're able to come back and allow guys like you and Storm to have that opportunity. So, what are your goals for this offseason as you head into really your first full NFL offseason? It's going to be a really big offseason for the Chargers in general, coming off Justin Herbert's rookie season, brand new coaching staff. What are you working on in this offseason? What are your goals for 2021?
I'm always trying to get faster, stronger, and just overall smarter with the game, making sure that I'm prepared, healthy, and making sure that I'm coming into camp, making an impact so that, I can uphold this standard that's been placed on me as of right now. So that's definitely my goal.
He mentioned Justin Herbert. What was it like playing with Justin Herbert in this rookie campaign? You have the shortened COVID offseason, and you have this rookie quarterback that, you didn't really kind of know much about coming into training camp. What was it like seeing his offensive rookie of the year campaign and being a part of that?
It was just overall just exciting. I mean, the guy can really sling it. He's very smart, and he's gifted overall, because for him to have to come in at such short notice and then just like flip a switch and ready to play, it was just absolutely insane to see it live and in person, and standing next to him. So it was really a great experience.
Yeah, you mentioned standing next to him. Are you really 6'8"? Because I feel like you tower over, Storm Norton's 6'7" and Justin is 6'6", and I feel like I look at you guys. Like, I feel like you might be pulling a little Kevin Durant and lowballing us a couple inches. Are you actually 6'8", or are you taller?
I think I'm like 6'8.5", maybe. Not quite 6'9", but I am 6'8" for sure.
Awesome, man. Well, that is fantastic. And we thank you so much for joining us, Donald. And we look forward to watching you guys play on the field in the coming weeks, or not coming weeks. It's football season 6 months away. What am I talking about? All right, Donald, thanks so much, man. And we wish you nothing but the best going forward.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Appreciate y'all guys.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoy that. And again, thank you so much to Donald Parham for taking the time out to give his thoughts there. I thought that, we had a good conversation with him. I had a good laugh about his height, because I swear he's taller than 6'8". I really do think that he's probably like closer to 6'10". But it is what it is. Alex, any other thoughts from our interview with Donald Parham before we move on to our next topic?
Yeah, he's definitely KDing his height, like you said. And no, I mean, I think he was pretty honest with us about all of his questions, or all the questions that we had for him. He was pretty brief, to the point. I was just kind of surprised that I was like, hey, tell me about how like the XFL shut down. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. I was thankful for the opportunity. So I wanted to get a little bit more, but maybe I'll have to wait for that XFL documentary.
There we go. So we're going to continue our draft conversations for today, focusing on the tight ends and wide receivers. We're really excited about these conversations that we're going to have in the coming weeks, focusing on the draft. This was something that we were really excited about planning. The draft is my personal favorite time of the year. So basically what we're going to do for the wide receivers today, we are going to each pick a wide receiver that we are pounding the table for in the first 3 rounds, somebody that we think is going to return value and turn into a really good player. We're going to talk about players that we don't really understand where the hype is coming from, or if they were tough to evaluate. And then we're each going to give a sleeper wide receiver in the later rounds, day 3 kind of player who we think could turn into something, serviceable and potentially turn into a star player. And then we'll get to the tight end conversation after that. So who wants to go first on their pound of the table receiver? Should we start with Tyler or Alex?
Start with Tyler.
Okay, Tyler, who is the wide receiver that you are pounding the table for? I cannot wait to hear this.
Well, I mean, I feel like you guys already know, so fine. It's Elijah Moore, and I will pound the table for this guy all draft long. If he's there in the second round, I would almost overlook every need the Chargers had to take this guy. And there are a few players I would do that for. Elijah Moore is one of them. In terms of production, 1,200 yards in 8 games. He put up 143 against Alabama and 227 against Florida, which are on the schedule. You want to talk about size being an issue because he's a slot guy? I see the 6th most missed tackles and the 5th most contested catches in the league in college football last season. Is he versatile? 4th most slot yards, 4th most slot catches, 6th most screen catches, 9th most deep catches, 7th most deep yards. How do we feel about his hands? He has a lower drop percentage than Chase, Smith, and Waddle. Physically, he's actually an inch taller than Waddle and weighs a few pounds more, and he just ran a 4.34. So somehow, this guy with this production, his metrics, his measurables, all adding up is projected to be a round 2 slot receiver. I just say that's honestly some bullshit. I get it that like he's a slot receiver and maybe you wouldn't take him over someone like Bateman, But like I will say with confidence right now, where he's tied, like I would tie him with Waddle for my third receiver behind Smith and Chase. More in the second round would be a freaking perfect fit for the Chargers. I would love him on the team. I've loved him since I watched him. Steven saw him first. He had a huge, high grade on him. I'm like, oh my God, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And then, it's just one of those times where you have to message the two guys and say, oh my God, Elijah Moore, like, you were right.
Yeah.
I love Elijah Moore, and I wherever he goes, I hope he succeeds, because I think everything checks the box. He checks every single box, and I love him. I hope he does well in the NFL.
Man, he's such a fun player to watch, and I think he, with all of that, I think he has the best hands in the draft. Like you watch him make these catches, and his quarterback will turn it around the wrong way or throw it at his ankles, and it's no problem, man.
Yeah.
Elijah Moore catches everything. So I'm a huge fan of Elijah Moore. He would have been my pick if Tyler hadn't chosen him first. So, but that's okay. We'll get to Alex's pound the table player for the wide receivers. Alex, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I kind of like Anthony Schwartz a lot out of Auburn. Everyone's seen kind of the crazy, pro day he put up. He had like a 4.26 40-yard dash. He's arguably the fastest player in this draft. I don't know if it's arguable even, like I think he just is. And so that gives people some pause, because it's like, well, John Ross was fast too, and you have all these other fast receivers maybe that didn't pan out. But when I watch his game, I just see something that's a little bit more dynamic, and like I kind of don't agree with the comp of Tyreek Hill, because he's also like bigger than Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
But he can kind of be used in that way. Like there's Auburn using him in like end around plays, just as the receiver straight up. And he kind of became more of a intermediate receiver, or developed into more of that in 2020. I think he had 41 for 440 yards in 2019, and then he had 54 catches for 636 yards in 2020. So even though he wasn't putting up as many of those highlight plays in 2020, he was definitely still putting up production. He's just really fast, and this this Chargers team needs speed, but also efficient speed and yards after catch, because you have someone like a Jalen Guyton or Tyron Johnson who, you'll throw like a, 60-yard pass to and they catch it, right? Or, something like that. But Anthony Schwartz also led all the Power 5 conferences in yards after catch, right? And that's a kind of telling stat to me, where it's just like, this guy, it's not just that he's going to run fast on a route and then catch a ball, Herbert drops in there. He can do some of that production himself. And that's something that's telling to me kind of when I look at receivers, not just speed, but what are you doing with that speed? So I really like Anthony Schwartz. The draft, position is all over the place on him. I heard
so
Mel Kiper has said late first round, which is crazy to me. I've heard second, I've heard third, I've heard fourth, I've heard fifth. He's all over the place. But for me, if you're sitting there third, fourth round, probably third with the compensatory 97th pick, or the fourth round with your first pick, I think that's kind of a perfect place to take him. I don't know if he'll make it that far. And the Chargers do have to figure out cornerback, edge, offensive tackle first. But I would really just love to see what Anthony Schwartz could do in this offense that is in desperate need of a speed guy who, not only runs fast, but can create their own offense.
Yeah, that's a really good call, because, we've kind of talked about the Chargers needing a variety, as somebody who can come in and do a lot of different things. And I think Schwartz could certainly do that. The Mel Kiper saying that, man, like this wide receiver class is crazy, right? Because, I just did my top 50, laid it out on Google Sheets. I had 9 receivers in the top 50. Didn't include Schwartz, who was right there on the cusp. So, that statement by Mel Kiper of, well, he could go in the late first or he could go in the fourth round, it honestly could apply to like 12 receivers in this class. Like there are so many good receivers this class. And I think Schwartz is going to be a crazy one to keep an eye on. So my guy here is going to be De'Ami Brown from North Carolina. Everybody who knows me and listens to this show knows that I hate NFL comparisons, and I just like, I can't stand them. Like we talked about it for the quarterbacks, right? With Zach Wilson being compared to Kyler Murray and Aaron Rodgers and like all this stuff, like how outrageous that is. but I could not help but see Devontae Adams when I was watching De'Ami Brown. Not the best athlete, not the best, he's not going to run, a 4.3 like all these other guys that we're talking about, but he's fast enough and he is such a smooth route runner. I think he's got the best release package in this class. He gets off the line of scrimmage super quick, does not mess around, and that's a huge deal in the NFL. You see a lot of guys with release packages in college who really dance, take half a second or a second to get off the line of scrimmage and get out of press. De'Ami doesn't mess around, and he can beat all the routes. He can beat all the coverages, excuse me. And he averaged 20 yards a catch. He had 8 touchdowns this season, which, given the supporting cast that North Carolina had, the fact that he almost had 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, like that's outstanding production for him. And I'm just a huge fan of his. It took me a little bit to get there because, the first couple of games that I watched of his were against Florida State. And he had a good game against Florida State, but I did feel like Asante Samuel Jr. really kind of shut him down a little bit. He still had 56 yards and a touchdown, but it took me a little bit to get there. But then you watch him put up 240 yards against Virginia, 160 yards against Miami, and you're just like, damn, this guy is a big play threat waiting to happen. And he didn't get a ton of yards after catch abilities because they had Daz Newsome and Michael Carter, who kind of really did that. But I do think that he'll be able to develop into a very well-rounded receiver. And again, second round kind of player. I think he's going to be a fantastic wide receiver in the NFL. I cannot wait to see where he goes. I hope that he does not go to a place like New England, who just cannot develop wide receivers and don't have a quarterback. I really hope that he goes to a place with a quarterback who can really push the ball down the field and get the most out of him, because I do think he's going to be a great deep threat in the NFL, somebody who can develop into a true number one receiver, which is something that, when I'm looking at all these receivers, their grades they're not dependent on this, but if I don't think that they can develop into a wide receiver one, like a true, lead guy, then I'm not going to give them a high grade. And I do think that De'Ami Brown could absolutely develop into a true number one target for an NFL team.
Yeah, no, he has all the makings of a complete receiver. I think he blocks in the run game. He has a variety of releases and true deep speed. I don't think his route running tree is as variable as one would want from a complete receiver, but the nuance of his releases and then his subtle moves on deep routes, it hints that he has some sort of capacity for learning and developing a complete route tree. Yeah. His speed's no joke. You talked about the Florida State game. I don't remember who was covering him at the time, but there's one play where a corner was playing too far off of him, and he caught an easy out route, no problem. The next play, I don't know if it was the same corner. The corner played him tighter, and De'Ami Brown just burned him deep. Yeah. So to have that variability in what he can do, I think is really outstanding. So yeah, another player I like for sure.
And that's the thing too. I was listening to Mac Brown's press conference for his pro day this weekend. And that's something that he talked about with both De'Ami and Daz Newsome, is that both of them really take pride in blocking it. And you see it on film. You see them pushing guys down the field and making plays for Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. So both of the Carolina receivers, I'm a big fan of both of them. All right, let's talk about people that we don't necessarily understand the hype about, or that were a little tougher to evaluate. We'll start with Alex on this one. Who's your guy here that you kind of just can't really wrap your head around?
Sage Surratt from Wake Forest. So he was someone that opted out of the 2020 season. And when he opted out, he had kind of like a first round grade from some people. And so I was like, okay, back then I was like, all right, let me watch the film and see what this guy is. And whatever I watch him, I'm like, okay, well, he's not really good at picking up yak, and he doesn't really separate, and he doesn't really have good movement, and he's not fast. I don't know. He kind of reminds me of what if Chase Claypool wasn't athletic, or, to make a comparison, he's shorter Mike Williams. And that's kind of what I see when I watch him. And, he is going to be that deep ball threat, kind of like Mike Williams is. I do think he is, he put up 11 touchdowns in 2019. So, he could be a red zone guy. I just he doesn't really give me a good comp to anybody when I watch him. And I'm just like, meh. I mean, I think on, the Draft Network right now, he's 135th ranked prospect. So that kind of means third, fourth round. And I just don't really see, and it'll depend on his pro day too, because if he runs a fast 40, that's what will get the people talking. But he's not particularly like quick, elusive. He's kind of like the opposite of everything you just said about De'Ami Brown. So like if you need a big body in your offense, that's kind of okay.
Yeah.
But I just don't think he's a very valuable receiver, especially in a league where you can just go get plenty of guys that are over 6'3".
Yeah, that's a tough one for me as well, because people are still talking about him being like a third, fourth round pick, like you mentioned. And like it's not even that he's like a big athlete either. Like, Mike Williams, the thing he does is the jump balls, right? Like Surratt just kind of boxes people out, and like that's how he wins. Is like he just kind of, like Antonio Gates would kind of just box people out and like just bully them, kind of like a post player in basketball. But that doesn't work in the NFL, man. Not as a receiver. If you're a 6'5", 270-pound tight end, like, yeah, that works, but not as a 210-pound receiver. So I don't get Sage Surratt much either. The player who I recently bumped him up, but I don't understand the hype around Rondale Moore. I just don't. You look at his passing chart, and he had like 3 catches throughout his career that went further than 20 yards in the air. So his route tree, like, it could certainly develop, right? Like you could project him to be a much more well-rounded wide receiver, but I kind of look at him as somebody that should make a switch to running back. Like he's built like one. He doesn't have a diverse route tree, like a guy like Elijah Moore who can do everything. Rondale Moore can't do that, and so he's all screen passes, slants, hooks. Like it's all yards after catch for him, and that's fine. I think he could have a role for that, for sure. I just people are saying that like the Packers should take him in the first round, and like, or the Chiefs should take him in the first round, and I just don't see that. The NFL is really moving in a direction of like versatile receivers who can do a lot of different things. Like everybody kind of, I forget who it was, but she put this tweet out of like all these terrible comparisons to Tyreek Hill, and people comparing Rondale Moore to Tyreek Hill. I just think that's kind of not that I care about this, but Tyreek Hill is so diverse as a route runner and what he does on the football field, because he can beat you deep. He can beat you, doing an end around. He can beat you on a slant. He can beat you with all these intermediate routes. And Rondale Moore can't do that. So I think the comparison to Tyreek Hill really is just, it's kind of disrespectful to Tyreek, and it's just not, it's not there for me. So Rondale Moore, I think he's a very, very good gadget player, but that's all he is in my opinion. I'm not spending a top 100 pick on him unless I absolutely have to, and like there's nobody else there on the board that I'm interested in.
Yeah, I'm the guy who said the Packers should take him in the first round.
I'm sorry, man. I didn't know that was you.
That was okay. Only because I think that would just be a lot of fun, and that Rodgers, for God's sake, someone get Rodgers a weapon. Like, for the love of God, please don't not take another quarterback and then a glorified fullback back to back. Please. I don't care if they take more, but I get it. I'm kind of hoping that he gets to the NFL and someone puts him in a system that just works. But otherwise, what you didn't mention yet is obviously the injuries. And for that reason, I would definitely not take him in the first round. I think the Packers should take him because it's fun as hell, but I wouldn't actually take him. If the Chargers are picking at 30, 31, 32, I wouldn't want them to take him, especially when there's other options on the board.
All right, Tyler, who's your guy that you kind of can't wrap your head around?
Cool. Can't wait to piss off Chargers Twitter. So I almost went with Jalen Waddle just to piss everybody off, but I'm not. So I'm going to go with a guy that Pro Football Focus has currently a 3rd round pick projection on. That's Jalen Darden out of North Texas.
Yes.
I don't hate the player. I just kind of hate that projection. And, I posted a video yesterday of him against Louisiana Tech where he basically gets open 4 times, the same play almost, and the defense still did not cover him over and over again. And, I never want to scout the helmet of the player, but I am allowed to take competition into account. And in my opinion, the competition he faced was awful.
Yeah.
The Houston Huskies, the UTSA Roadrunners, Louisiana Tech. Hi, Bobby Holly. His toughest competition was what? SMU. Look, on the field, his best attributes, his lateral quickness and his shiftiness, they show, and they are easily his best attributes.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned with is that 40 time where he only ran a 4.46, where everybody is running like a 1/10 of a second faster.
Yeah.
Which means I think our eyes have tricked us into thinking that he's faster than he is in game because his competition is so bad.
Yeah.
So combine the awful competition, a surprisingly low 40 time, being 5'9", 174. Guys, that's smaller than me, and him only having 1 year of production, and he did not catch a single contested catch last season. I'm just lower on him because it doesn't add up.
Yeah, that's a good call. Sorry about the delay there. I was thinking Alex would jump in, but I don't hate him like you said. I think
Yeah.
he's a good player. I'm not taking him in the third round. Absolutely not. If I'm taking like a smaller school, I think really the biggest issue is people think of him as like a burner, right? Like somebody will look at him and think that he's somebody that will have, average 20 yards of catch and like do all these great things deep. And I don't think that's him. He's not as much of a gadget player as Rondell Moore is, but he's kind of in between. And so for me, like if you want a smaller school deep threat guy, like I'm taking Dwayne Eskridge, who can do a lot of different things and not just, beat guys after the catch. And so I'm okay with the player. I just kind of disagree with the evaluation. And I would just much prefer, other receivers in the third round. All right, let's talk about some sleepers of ours that we really like. I'll go first here. My guy is Josh Palmer from Tennessee. If you were able to watch some film from the Senior Bowl, you saw him go out and ball out, and so I was really intrigued to return to his film and see what was going on here. And the first thing I'll say is that his quarterback play was awful. Like if you put him in a different situation, I think we're probably talking about a player who would be going much higher than where he will go. Kind of getting the Donovan Peoples-Jones treatment from Shea Patterson last year. So I think he'll probably end up going in the 6th, 7th round, maybe the 5th if he's lucky. But I really like his skill set. I think he can separate really well. He's got a nice release package. And he's got really good size. He's got 6'2", 6'2.5" kind of size. I think he's able to show off these jump ball skills. So I think he is well-rounded as a intermediate to deep threat kind of player. I did not see what he ran over the weekend, but I'm pretty sure he had a really good day there. Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl thinks that he's a day 2 lock. I don't think that's going to happen. But I really like Josh Palmer as somebody who could come in, be a wide receiver 3 for your team, provide some value, maybe be like a Tyrell Williams kind of player who could potentially be like a wide receiver 2 in a pinch. But I think he's a player that you could take on as a safe player, not as like a developmental guy who's going to bring a lot of risk to the table. I think he's an outstanding wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 option, and that's where he will go.
Yeah, my guy to kind of go later in the drafts as a sleeper is Amir Smith-Marset out of Iowa. I think he's a really interesting prospect, mainly because whenever I watch Iowa games, well, one, they kind of have the same bad quarterback play, stuff that's not really conducive to obviously wide receiver production, but they also really didn't use him right. And they kind of have like a power running game sort of vibe. So it's like, it's not really, the kind of offense where a receiver is going to break out and put up huge numbers, but he did test really well athletically. I think he had like a 9.4 the relative athletic score. I think he's just a really solid receiver. He had like the fastest 10-yard split for a 1.44, which is a crazy number. So I just think he has experience both in the slot and a primary boundary receiver, has a lot of kick return attempts, and sort of like Joe Reed last year, he actually averages like 29 yards per attempt, has 2 touchdowns on kick returns. So I don't know. He gives me a lot of like Robbie Anderson kind of vibes when I see him, and that's sort of a receiver that I would kind of want on this team, which is like, he's not super fast, right? He ran like a 4.43, but I think he's fast enough and he can stretch the field vertically in a way where he gets yak and he does stuff. Again, like kind of like I said with Anthony Schwartz, but to a different degree, he creates his own offense. My main thing with him is just I see him not kind of being properly used, and I feel like he's going to be one of those receivers where, people say, how didn't we take him higher, right? And to me, it's insane that he's still like a 6th round pick on the Draft Network. Although I believe Tony Pauline on Pro Football Network said that there's some that view him as like a 3rd, 2nd round pick. So I don't know. That's another one where it's kind of all over the place on him. But I sort of, because of his versatility and the fact that you can use him in the slot, you can use him on the boundary, you can use him in special teams, I sort of view him as a much better version of last year's Joe Reed pick. And I think that can be a really intriguing pick for the Chargers if he really does drop to the 5th or 6th round and they haven't taken a wide receiver yet. Yeah, he's just one of the most explosive players that Iowa has produced in like a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good call. If you're a USC fan, you are very familiar with how explosive that player is because he just went down and dominated the Trojans at the Holiday Bowl. Excuse me, Tyler, who is your sleeper pick here?
I just want to say, Alex, that sounds like a really intriguing guy. I have no idea who he is. Stephen, in terms of Palmer, I haven't even finished evaluating Palmer because I stopped watching that quarterback.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
I couldn't watch it anymore. So I completely get it. I believe he had a good senior bowl or whatever senior practice. So, that's great. I'm going with the guy we already mentioned, sort of. Not a guy. So Pro Football Focus has him going in the 6th round. And I believe the draft network has him at like 150 something. So I'm going to go with Daz Newsome from North Carolina. That offense is so good.
So much fun.
They're going to have 4 players drafted within the first like 6, maybe even 5 rounds. So I think he can be good if he fixes at least 2 things. It's catching the ball with his body. Don't do that. We have enough of those on the Chargers already. And then finishing his routes. I think sometimes he has some good routes. Sometimes he has some lazy ones. But the talent is there. He has a 4.3. He broke 14 or more tackles in 3 straight seasons. He kind of reminds me of a slightly later round Amari Rodgers, I guess, if you can't get Rodgers because Rodgers breaks so many tackles.
Yes.
Although Rodgers may switch to running back altogether. I don't think Newsome's going to do that. But I see the talent that is there for Newsome. And for him to go up in like the 5th, 6th round, like he's sort of projected right now, I think that'd be a really good get for whoever gets him.
That's a really good call. I think everybody's kind of trying to find like their version of Deebo Samuel. And that's like, there's so many slot receivers, gadget players, yards after catch threats this draft. It's kind of been like the theme of the wide receiver class. I think Daz Newsome would be, kind of in that very similar mold. And I do think like, if you're giving me, Amari Rodgers in the late 2nd or 3rd or Daz Newsome in the 5th, I think I would rather just have Daz Newsome. So I think that's a good conversation to have. All right, guys, any other thoughts on the wide receiver class before we move on to our tight end topic?
Not at 13.
The only thing that I wanted to say about Daz Newsome, if you haven't watched him play, go look up his catch on Duke where he just Randy Mossed the guy behind the back. One of the most fun things I've ever seen. College wide receiver too. But yeah, also about Daz Newsome, I think he's a really good blocker.
Yep.
And also the other thing with him, he does have some special teams value too. Has taken some punt returns, I think, for touchdowns, and has returned punts, throughout his college career. So something to consider there. And that's something I like to see in a lot of college receivers where I go, are the Chargers going to draft this guy? I do want to see some special teams value because it's like, sure, I don't want to bet the whole season on, does Nasir Adderley, pick up where he left off on kick returns in December? Don't think he will. So, you may as well have a couple backup plans.
Oh, sorry about that.
Stephen died.
Nope. I got a notification and I saw a Colts picture and I was thinking it was Malik Hooker, but it was the thing about Bob Sanders. So not Malik Hooker. But that is a good point, Alex, because these wide receiver 3s, 4s, and 5s, like they have to play special teams. And so, that really is a big thing to take into account. All right, let's get to our tight end topic. Obviously, there's not a ton of tight ends. This tight end class is not great, so we're not going to do the same kind of format here. But we wanted to have a conversation about who the tight end 2 is. And Tyler kind of pointed this out today with a Tommy Tremble versus Brevin Jordan kind of conversation. So we're gonna talk about Brevin Jordan here. This is kind of gonna be a Brevin Jordan segment and how he compares to the rest of the class, because it still kind of seems that Pat Freiermuth from Penn State is kind of the perceived tight end 2 of this class. And none of the 3 of us agree with that. We all have Brevin Jordan as tight end 2. Tyler, I feel like, is the biggest fan of him, so I'll let him go first here. Why do you like Brevin Jordan so much, and kind of what do you see his potential being in the NFL?
I think it comes down, everyone knows who he is as a pass catcher. I don't think I have to explain that or prove that to anybody. But I think people underrate him as a run blocker or a pass protector. Like, I think he's a legit blocker as well. And I think people are forgetting that. Like, yes, Tommy Tremble does get that spotlight. I know, Steven, you're a fan of someone whose name I totally forget that you might mention later. You know, a couple of great blocking tight ends. But I think Brevin Jordan can also do that work really well. Jordan Reed was on with the Chargers the other day talking to Chris Hare, and he was talking about how you get someone like Brevin Jordan and you have your Jonnu Smith. And he said that Brevin Jordan would help you, I think, revolutionize your passing attack. And I think just that at tight end, which is exactly what the Chargers should be looking for.
Yeah.
I think that just makes him the best prospect. The reason I don't have Pat Fryermuth higher, if you nickname yourself Baby Gronk, I expect you to block better.
Yes.
Not, I don't know if he gave himself that nickname, but I didn't think his blocking was as good as it should. Like, Gronkowski's a really good blocker.
Oh yeah.
You know, we saw that against the Bucks and the Chargers last season. And I didn't really think Fryermuth had that. So when all said and done, if you're kind of the same blocker as Jordan, even if you're slightly better, but Jordan's the superior athlete and pass catcher, I'm taking him. So he's my clear-cut tight end too. I don't think it's really that close.
Yeah, and for me, like the Pat Fryermuth, like I don't think he's like a good blocker kind of at all. Like he was kind of supposed to develop into that like a couple times, and he just never really did. You know, so there is something to be said about like vertical, you know, kind of, you know, catching and stretching the ball down the field. I kind of think he's more like a Hunter Henry than he is a Gronk, and I don't mean that in a negative way, although
Absolutely.
yes, I do mean that in a negative way. But, yeah, I think that, you know, he also, I think, did have a shoulder surgery that he had, and that kind of forced him to end his season. So,
Yeah.
you know, you have to pay attention to the medicals there. But just like being a bad blocker isn't what this Chargers team needs in particular, because Donald Parham is still developing as a blocker. Steven Anderson's not really a blocker, and Jared Cook's not a blocker. So you, if you're going to draft a tight end, I think you need someone like Brevin Jordan, who at least has that athleticism and can develop into it. I think you need someone like a Tommy Tremble or a Hunter Long. You know, I just don't think Pat Fryermuth is really the best fit, which is why, you know, in some systems he might be the tight end 2 in this class, but I think he's kind of a particularly bad fit for the Chargers.
Yeah, he is. And you know, Pat Fryermuth is much more of like a traditional tight end in terms of like what he can do as a route runner. Like he's a solid route runner, but he's not going to be the kind of player who can stretch the field or, you know, give you a ton of yards after catch. Like he's kind of, you know, the Hunter Henry comparison is fair to me because he's a solid player at a different amount of things. Like I think he's a decent blocker. I don't think he's a high level blocker like Hunter Henry is, but he's a solid route runner. He's solid after the catch. He's solid at the high point. But you look at Brevin Jordan, and I love that Jordan Reed said that about him because he is a really, really good athlete. And their pro day is on Monday, tomorrow, as we're recording this. So I'm really interested to see what Brevin Jordan puts up because I think he's a crazy athlete. And so, you know, I right now, so we have grades out of 8. Like that's kind of our number and that we kind of decided upon, and that's kind of what the NFL has been doing recently. So Brevin Jordan for me has a 6.6 grade. He is in my top 50. Pat Fryermuth has a 6.1 and is not. So I don't think it's all that close either. This kind of conversation. I just think the way that the NFL position is trending towards tight ends, you know, guys like Pat Fryermuth are, you know, the days of the past. And, you know, that's kind of another thing that we could have talked about with Hunter Henry is like, you look at where this tight end position is going, it's trending towards being athletic positions who can really cause mismatches, split out wide, split into the slot, and play in line. And Brevin Jordan can do all of those things. So I like Brevin Jordan a lot. You know, I think if he's sitting there at 47 and the Chargers took him, I would completely understand that because you want to talk about a player who could potentially develop into a true like top 5 tight end in the future outside of Kyle Pitts. It's Brevin Jordan. I don't think that Pat Fryermuth or Noah Gray or Hunter Long can really ever be that. But I do think Brevin Jordan can come in maybe in a couple of years, develop if he's put into a right situation and be a top 5 tight end because he's a great blocker and he's a great, great athlete.
Yeah, and as far as like the baby Gronk thing goes, like, you know, I sort of think that, you know, because he gets that because he's like 6'5", 250. Tommy Tremble is like 6'4", 247. And Hunter Long is 6'5", 250. So like, I kind of think both of those guys are more, they're better blockers for sure. I don't know if, you know, I kind of think they're also both a little bit more dynamic. And so that's where, if you're comparing a tight end to Gronk, yeah, like Tyler said, I think you just have to be a better blocker. But also, yeah, like the Gronk archetype, I think, is something that's becoming, a thing of the past. And I think over the next 10 years, you're going to see more Kyle Pitts come out, where it's just like, okay, this dude can line up a receiver. He can do everything we need him to. And he's just, this, kind of weapon X on offense. And that's sort of where I think the position is headed. And, there's a lot of tight ends, both in this draft and probably in the next couple drafts, that are sort of just, they don't fit that sort of archetype.
Yeah, you look at what like Travis Kelce has done and what Kyle Pitts is going to do, and Darren Waller, like that's the future of the NFL, and George Kittle fits in that as well. Just get plus size athletes and help them develop in as blockers and route runners, and then figure it out later. And I like Tommy Tremble a lot. I think he has some good potential. I think he's a really good blocker, but he had 19 catches last year, so like let's pump the brakes a little bit. There was this one poll that had Tommy Tremble and Brevin Jordan were both on the board at 77, and Tommy Tremble was getting the majority of the votes. That is blasphemous. Like that is so bad. And Brevin Jordan is so much better of a prospect than Tommy Tremble is. And I think Tommy Tremble, like he's going to be a positive blocker in the NFL. And if he were a pick on the Chargers, I'd be very happy because of that skill set, and they need that skill set. But like I said, I don't see a world where Tommy Tremble is a top 5 10 in the NFL, whereas as Brevin Jordan does have that kind of potential. And he has that track record, right? Like he was a very, very productive player at Miami, and Tommy Tremble has 35 career catches. So let's pump the brakes a little bit on Tommy Tremble, please.
I like Tommy Tremble, but I would much rather have, this is not quite fair, but I'd much rather have Jonnu Smith than elite Virgil Green. Like I'd rather just go with Jonnu Smith. And then 100%. Hunter Long, I can't get behind him either, honestly. Like he looks like Hunter Henry. I can't get out of my head. Yeah. And like, why would we add another guy? Although he would be much cheaper.
He would be. Hunter Long is a tough evaluation for me as well, because like I was hoping that he would go down to the Senior Bowl and be like the guy, like be the tight end. And it turned out to be Trey McKitty, who had 6 catches at Georgia last year. So I just like, for the reputation that Hunter Long has, like on Twitter and social media and stuff like that, I was just kind of hoping for more. And I think him and Pat Frymuth are really like honestly very similar in terms of like evaluation, and like we've talked about, I don't think that's the future of the tight end position.
Yeah, and if you are taking, Brevin Jordan, if you're taking Tommy Tremble over Brevin Jordan, blasphemy.
Thanks, Alex.
Cool.
Welcome. That's my contribution. Get my
all right. Well,
get my contribution.
There we go. That was weird, but it's all good, man. All right, let's talk about some sleeper tight ends, because the Chargers I think will be in this kind of market. As much as I think Tommy Tremble could be a pick, I think it's more likely after the Steven Anderson signing that the Chargers make a move as like a developmental / blocking tight end. So listen, my favorite blocker in this class is Dylan Schoner from Iowa State. He has zero upside as a pass catcher. Just really kind of slow and doesn't really separate. He's got good hands though. And he is big, but as a blocker, man, I think it's exactly what the Chargers kind of need as like a 6th, 7th round pick who can come in and really just set the edge effectively. And really like the biggest thing with a zone scheme, like you need tight ends who can hold their own against edge rushers, either on the front side of the play or on the back side of the play. And I think Dylan Schoner has shown that enough on film for me to be comfortable with him. And then once you get him up against linebackers and safeties, he's super, super physical. And he really finishes at a high level, which is what I love to see out of tight ends who block, who are specialists in that regard. So Dylan Schoner is a bit of a sleeper. I posted a couple of clips about him on Twitter. I think he's a fantastic blocker, but again, zero upside as a pass catcher.
Well, at least you're honest. I'll go with I have one guy I'm just going to steal real fast from Jordan Reed, and that's Pro Wells, the tight end from TCU. Guess what? I watched absolutely zero of him. but he's a former basketball player who didn't even try football until his senior year. Jordan Reed likes him. So, hey, some guy to check out. And we know about guys who played basketball who switched to tight end. I don't know how to say this guy's name unless he's Spanish. This is Tony Poljan, or it'd be Poljan. And this, anyway, from Virginia, this guy's 6'7", 265. Parham is 6'8", 237. He played quarterback in high school. He threw and ran for a total of 116 touchdowns, was named the Michigan Gatorade Player of the Year. He also played basketball, where he scored over 1,000 points in high school. He had offers to play quarterback at Minnesota, Michigan State, and Nebraska. He signed with Central Michigan, where he played some games at quarterback, threw for 703 yards, and then switched to tight end. They eventually transferred to Virginia, and he had 38 catches, 411 yards, and 6 touchdowns this past season. Everyone pegs him as the traditional tight end to run blocking guy, and rightfully so, because he's freaking massive. I'll be honest, I think people are selling him short. I actually see him trying to run some decent routes, and they're good for a guy his size, which kind of makes sense because he was a quarterback who ran for 58 touchdowns and a former basketball player. So he's a really intriguing prospect, and projected late day 3 pick. Why not take a guy who's 6'7", 265 and just have the 6'8" Parham and the 6'7" Poljan, however you say his name. That was big old white Danish Viking, whatever looking guy. Have him out there. And I think that'd be pretty cool.
What a wild backstory, man. Because I watched him, I watched the same game that you did where he basically bull rushed a safety for a touchdown. But that backstory, man, as that high level of an athlete, that's an interesting developmental tight end right there. That is. Alex, who is your sleeper tight end that you want to talk about here?
I like Kylan Granson quite a bit out of SMU.
Yeah.
He had a good day. He had a good time at the Senior Bowl. Did some good work with when it came to one-on-ones on linebackers and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
But you watch his tape, and he's kind of like the day 3 version of Kyle Pitts, which doesn't sound like a good thing, but he can line up from a lot of positions. Doesn't quite have that level of athleticism like a first round talent. But I think he can create some mismatches over the field. Again, this is kind of one of those things where it's like, well, he plays in the American Athletics, so that, it's not the best competition, but it's not North Texas either. So I do think there is something to that. So I don't know. I like him. He isn't the biggest guy, which is also why I think he's not going to get drafted high. But I think he can get to the second level decently. And, we're talking about kind of day 3 guys anyway. If you really haven't drafted a tight end at this point, and, because you wanted to fortify quarterback and offensive line and edge and all those needs earlier, he's a guy that I wouldn't mind in round 5, round 6-ish.
Yeah, I thought that he had a really good senior role. Honestly, I felt like him or Trey McKitty were the best ones down there. So that's an interesting one. Definitely more of a pass catcher than he is a blocker, which again is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think he does have the size to be able to develop into that. The last one I want to bring up here is John Bates from Boise State. He is a very good blocker. He's not the same kind of blocker as a Brevin Jordan or a Dylan Schoner, but he is a good blocker. But he's got a ton of reps on special teams. And that's kind of an underrated aspect of being that third tight end is you got to be a special teams player. And that's really what gave Steven Anderson the most trouble last year was him being terrible on special teams. So I did not research his backstory, but Trevor Sikkema and Benjamin Solak said that he was a high level track athlete in high school, as I want to say like a hurdler and a javelin thrower or something like that. I would have to double check that. Sorry, I should have definitely checked that beforehand. But I do think that John Bates is a good blocker. He's a good route runner. And I think as like a 6th-7th round pick again, with that special teams experience could be a fit for what the Chargers are needing at this point.
Yeah, another guy I like that I'll just mention is Luke Farrell, who in some of my mock drafts I've grabbed in like the 6th or 7th round. He's a good blocker, has good hands, and he doesn't care a lot about like getting a certain amount of targets in the offense and doing all that. So if you're kind of completely sold on like, hey, we're going to have these 4 tight ends, Cook, Parham, Anderson, I think he can be sort of your, Virgil Green in training a little bit if you don't want to re-sign a Virgil Green or a veteran, just to get a guy that's a, kind of pure blocker and can catch if he needs to.
Absolutely. Tyler, any other thoughts on the tight ends here?
I kind of wish they had kept Hunter Henry just so I didn't have to watch a bunch of tight ends, honestly. It's like watching a bunch of 6th and 7th round former basketball playing tight ends. I'm like, what am I doing?
Oh man, this tight end class is rough, man. It's not pretty. So I think that's kind of the general consensus for tight ends in most drafts. You know, you pretty much always have like 1 or 2 guys who are like studs, and then it's just developmental guys who you hope can come in and contribute. So not a great tight end class. Kyle Pitts is my only 1st round grade, and Brevin Jordan is the only other tight end in the top 50 for me personally. But I please stop selling Brevin Jordan short, because he is a special talent in my opinion. I think he's going to be a really good player in the NFL. All right, so I guess that's it for this episode. Love those awkward silences at the end. That's the beauty of Zoom, am I right? So we are going to do our next mock draft coming up, so make sure and keep an eye out for that one. It's gonna be a really fun episode. And then I think we only have like 8 more episodes after this until the draft actually comes. So keep an eye out for all this content, you guys. It's gonna be a lot of fun. If you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go and do that. And thank you so much. Alex did a great job of showing his support for you guys and subscribing to our channel. It's been a great experience for us, and we hope that you guys enjoy the content that we are pumping out as well. So that'll do it for us. Stay tuned for the next episode. And again, we appreciate you guys so much.